Hey guys, welcome back to day 2 of distance learning. I'm Allende Abiola. I'm one of the third grade teachers at Tubman Elementary. As I already talked to you about a little bit yesterday, every day a different teacher is going to jump on the computer and record a different lesson for you. So tomorrow, please make sure you log back in for day 3 of distance learning. All right. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my face off of the screen. And I'm going to full screen my work so you can see it. Perfect. All right, guys, so I'm going to read the directions, and then I'm going to tell you exactly what I would like for you to do as we're reading. I'm going to guide you through every step of this process, so please just bear with me as I read these directions. It'll become more clear after we jump into the text, and you can see how I've annotated already. All right, so let's begin reading. Day 2. Reading closely by annotating the text. Objective. Today, you will reread and annotate the text titled Food Web and Earth's plant and animal species need each other to survive, report says, to identify key details. Directions. Reread Food Web and Earth's plant and animal species need each other to survive, report says. Use the annotation key below to mark up each text. During read, be sure to look for evidence that supports you in answering the questions you created on day 1. Look for evidence in each text that will help you answer the focus question for the week. Here goes the focus question in case we forgot. How do the parts of an ecosystem work together? So here goes the annotation key. Annotation really just means to mark up the text. It's just like a fancy word for that. And this is how they want you to mark it up as you're reading. So any major point, we're going to underline it. A major point is an important idea. Okay. Any key words that may be confusing or that we don't know, we're going to circle them. If there's any time that we have a question about something we read, we're going to write it in the margin. And if there's something that helps us to understand what we've read, we're going to write it in the margin as well. We're going to write it as a statement, of course, rather than a question. Okay. Again, when you see it on my text that I have already marked up, it's going to become much easier to see and understand. But this is what you need to keep in your mind to some extent as we are reading. Let's go back to the first page, or I should say day 1 graphic organizer really quickly so we can review our questions that we wrote. Now, my questions are not going to be the same ones as the questions that you had. I didn't give you these questions yesterday because I really wanted to come from you what you wanted to know before you read the text, right? So I hope you still retained those questions. If you didn't, you can use mine, but I would much prefer if you're analyzing the text and find out what you want to know rather than what Mr. A wants to know. All right, well, here goes my questions, and what we're going to do is after we read the text, we're going to circle back at the end, and we're going to answer these questions at the very end of the lesson. All right. My question 1 was, what do animals eat in an ecosystem? My question 2 is, how do humans affect an ecosystem? My question 3 was, how do animals depend on each other in an ecosystem? And my question 4 is, why are ecosystems important? And again, that's just going to be at the very end. We'll come back and see if we can answer. I'll answer my own questions, but you will answer the question that you wrote down that you had for day 1. I'm going to go to the first text that we have here. The first text is Food Web. As you can see, I've already marked up the text. I'm going to explain to you why I've done these things as we're reading, but when we get down here, it's going to be your turn to mark up the text. I want to say on your own a bit. Of course, I'll be there to guide you, but I really want you to determine for yourself what is important, what questions you have, etc. That way, it's not just all coming from me, right? All right, I'm going to begin reading. Food web. A food web consists of all the food chains in a single ecosystem. Immediately, I underline that because it helped me to understand what a food web is. All living things are in a food chain. For example, zebras eat plants and grasses. Lions eat the zebras. Lions, zebras, and the plants all belong to one food chain. Other animals eat zebras too. Other animals eat the same plants. They all form different food chains. Put together, these food chains are called a food web. I also underlined the last sentence because, again, it helps me to understand what a food web is. Trophic levels. Food chains have different levels. These are called trophic levels. I underlined the two sentences here. I underlined them because they help me to understand a little bit about what a trophic level is, not much yet. I also circled the word trophic level because that's a very important term, and I don't quite understand it yet, but we will. Okay. Here you can see I added a question in the margin. What are trophic levels? That's really what I wanted to know at this point. Producers. Organisms in the first trophic level are called producers. Most producers are plants. Algae and some bacteria are also producers. Here I underline the first two sentences. It helps me to understand what a producer is. Producers are in the first trophic level, and we also know that producers are mostly plants. I circled the word producer. Each producer makes its own food. Most producers use photosynthesis. That means they use sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to create energy. I underlined the entire thing here because this gives me a clear definition, or a clear understanding, I should say, of how producers make their own food. They do it through a process called photosynthesis, which I circled. And then photosynthesis means that they use light and carbon dioxide and water to create energy. And here I also circled carbon dioxide. Notice here that I get a definition of what photosynthesis is. I don't really get one of what carbon dioxide is. And sometimes we're going to encounter words that the text does not give us a definition for. And what we're going to do in that particular case is we're going to go look in the dictionary, or we'll look in Google, either after the lesson or if we have time during. We won't do that today during the lesson. But we would do it during the lesson or sometime after the lesson to help us understand what this word means that we don't understand. Okay? I'm going to keep going. Consumers. The next trophic levels are animals that eat producers. They are called consumers. Again, I underlined that straight away. It helps me to understand what a consumer is, and that is an animal that eats a producer. Some consumers are herbivores while others are carnivores. They can also be omnivores, which means they eat both meat and plants. Here I circled the word omnivore. It gives me a definition, but we want to make sure we're catching it. So I make sure I circle it. As soon as I saw it, like, oh, what's an omnivore? I circled it, but it gives me a definition right after, which is omnivores eat both meat and plants. Okay. Primary consumers are herbivores. Underline that really quickly for me. They are plants and other producers. Deer, mice, and elephants are herbivores. They eat grass, shrubs, and trees. In the desert, a mouse is a primary consumer. It eats seeds and fruit. In the ocean, many fish and turtles are herbivores. They eat algae and seagrass. And again, I underline primary consumers because it helps me to understand that they are herbivores. And herbivores are animals that eat plants. Okay? Secondary consumers are animals that eat herbivores. What this means is that a secondary consumer eats another animal. So another word for that, of course, is carnivore. All right. In a desert, that secondary consumer may be a snake. It eats mice. In an underwater kelp forest, sea otters are secondary consumers. They hunt sea urchins. Secondary consumers are at the third trophic level. I had a question here that I wrote down, something I was curious about the text has not answered yet. Do any other animals eat secondary consumers? I was very curious to know that. We're going to see if we keep reading, if we can answer that question. Animals at the next level eat secondary consumers. In the desert, an owl or eagle may hunt snakes. Top predators are also called apex predators. No other animals eats an apex predator. Lions are apex predators. Great white sharks are apex predators in the ocean. Here, I underline that animals in the next trophic level eat secondary consumers, and they are called apex predators. Right? So I underlined those two sentences. What information I've gathered here is that an apex predator is an animal that eats other animals. So again, he is a carnivore, and no other animal eats an apex predator. So I was kind of able to answer my question from the last page, right? Do any other animals eat secondary consumers? I understand now that yes, some animals do eat secondary consumers, and they are called apex predators. An apex predator, no animal eats an apex predator. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to move on to detritivores and decomposers. At this point, I'm going to give you some responsibility, and it's going to be your job to go ahead and underline and circle as I am reading and you are reading it to yourself. I'm going to be here to guide you and give you hints and clues, but I really do want you to think about on your own what you would like to underline or circle, or questions you have that are going to help you to understand. And as far as the questions go, these are questions that, or things that you're curious about. It's not really what Mr. A would want you to write. It's really more so about what you want to understand or what you do not understand yet while you're reading, okay? So please make sure you're writing some of those in the margin as we're going on, as I've done. And also, if you need more time to underline or write, what you can do is you can pause the video and then write or underline, and then go ahead and play the video after you're done, okay? Again, detritivores and decomposers. Detritivores and decomposers are at the end of a food chain. Detritivores eat things that are not alive. Vultures eat. Here, what can we underline or circle that will help us to understand what we've read so far? The sentence I probably would have underlined was detritivores and decomposers are at the end of food chains. Detritivores eat things that are not alive. Those two sentences really help me to understand what detritivores and decomposers are, okay? If you want to circle something, let's please circle detritivores and circle decomposers as well, because we may not understand exactly how those work yet, but we will as we continue to read. Some organisms, like fungi and bacteria, are decomposers. They turn dead plants and other organisms into soil. They let food chains start over. So here, what we want, oh no, I'm not going to tell you what's underlined, of course. So I want you to figure out what you're going to underline and what you're going to circle. That way you have a clearer understanding of the text so far. So again, perhaps we would have underlined that some organisms like fungi and bacteria are decomposers. We might have also underlined that they turn dead plants and other organisms into soil. That helps us to understand what a decomposer is. Let's keep going. We're almost done with this text. For example, grass makes food through photosynthesis. A rabbit eats the grass, then a fox eats the rabbit. When the fox dies, worms and fungi break down its body. The animal becomes part of the soil. There, it leaves nutrients for plants to grow. This way, the cycle keeps going. What do we want to underline here? What do we want to circle here that will help us to understand? So this was mostly talking about how the cycle continues. So we can underline the last sentence, this way the cycle keeps going. If there's something else there that'll help you to understand this process, feel free to underline that as well. All right, let's keep going. Biomass. Biomass is the energy in living creatures. It starts with the sun's energy. Plants use sunlight to create energy, or biomass, for themselves. When animals eat these plants, they also create energy or biomass. At each step, energy gets lost, though. Animals are only able to take a part of it. please go ahead and let's underline a circle, things that are going to help us to understand. We're going to underline the key details. I'm going to circle any words that are important that we may not understand. So we probably figured out that we would have underlined that biomass is the energy in living creatures. It starts with the sun's energy. Plants use sunlight to create energy or biomass for themselves. That really gives us an idea of what biomass is. As you go up the food chain, there is less and less biomass. There is more energy in the lower trophic levels. That is why food webs need more producers and herbivores. They can only have a few carnivores and omnivores. Sometimes food chains can fail. If plants are destroyed, herbivores do not have enough to eat. Their numbers go down. Humans can also destroy a food chain. People cut down forests for wood. I'm going to keep going. Bioaccumulation. Pesticides get into the soil and water. Sometimes an animal eats a polluted plant. The pesticides stay in the animal's fat. Then a carnivore eats that animal. It takes in more and more pesticide. This is called bioaccumulation. In the 1940s and 50s, bald eagles began disappearing. DDT was a major reason. DDT stands for dichloro-diphenyl-trichloroethane. It is a pesticide. DDT was building up in the soil and water. Fish ate organisms with DDT. Bald eagles ate the fish. Because of the DDT, they started laying eggs with thin shells. These shells often broke and the baby birds died. Let's stop here and underline any key details that we've just learned about bioaccumulation. Let's go ahead and underline in the 1940s and 50s, bald eagles began disappearing. DDT was the reason. We can also circle dichloro-diphenyl-trichloroethane, and we should be able to understand that because the word is so long, they've abbreviated as DDT. Okay, we can also circle that as well. Another important detail is that because of this DDT, the eagles started laying eggs with thin shells. We're going to underline that as well. And it made the baby birds die before they hatch. We're going to underline the last sentence here as well. Let's keep moving. The U.S. government decided that using DDT was against the law. Many food webs have come back. Baby eagles are now hatching again. So again, I would like for you to go ahead and underline and circle anything that you find important in that small little paragraph there. So we probably figured out that the first sentence, the U.S. government decided that using DDT was against the law. And also the second and third sentences are also pretty important. Many food webs have come back and baby eagles are now hatching again. Okay. All right, guys, we have one more text to go through. You guys are doing such a great job. This makes the process a little bit longer as we're reading, but it's totally worth it because it helps us to understand the text on our own without as much teacher assistance, right? So this is a very important strategy. We have one more text to get through. I'm very proud of you guys through bearing with me in this process. We're almost done. Let's go ahead and read the second text right now. The second text is titled, Earth's Plant and Animal Species Need Each Other to Survive, report says. Some people might think plants and animals do not make much difference to us. Scientists say we are all connected though. The world's biodiversity trouble could hurt everyone. Immediately, what word do we want to circle? That's right, biodiversity. Let's keep going. Biodiversity is the variety of living things in an environment. An environment can be big or small. Forests, oceans, and deserts are examples. What do we want to underline in this sentence? Sorry, not one sentence, 3 sentences that I've just read. What is the most important detail here? That's right. Biodiversity is the variety of living things in an environment. Are there any questions that we might want to write down before Mr. A continues? If we do, we're going to write them down here in the margin, or here in the margin. Let's keep going. A report on Earth's species. A new report was released on May 6th. It said that nature is in trouble. It said that many kinds of animals could become extinct or die out. The decline of nature is everyone's problem, it said. It is happening around the world. Is there anything we want to circle or underline here that we just learned? Key details or important words that we may not understand? An important detail could be that it is said that nature is in trouble. Another one could be that it is said that many kinds of animals could become extinct or die out. This is very important for us as we just finished reading because, as we know, humans depend on these resources. I'm going to keep going. The report was done by the United Nations. It is an international group that tries to get countries to work together. Nature is important for people to live, the report said. Stuart Pym is a professor at Duke University in North Carolina. He said if you hurt nature, it is going to bite you back. Below are 4 ways people depend on nature. Food comes from nature. Kai Chan helped to write the report. He said almost all food comes from nature. He is a scientist at the University of British Columbia in Canada. The world is growing more food. There has been pressure on crops from pollution and other forces. Though, he said, that has made prices go up, he said. Here, is there anything that we would like to underline or anything that we would like to circle that's going to help us to understand that food comes from nature? Maybe we just want to underline the heading, but we need to underline something that is like the key point here. Let's keep moving. And again, if I'm moving too fast, feel free to pause the video and write and underline, and then go ahead and replay the video once you're done. Medicine and tests need the environment. Many people use medicines that come from nature. Thomas Lovejoy is a scientist at George Mason University in Virginia. He points to a microbe that lives in Yellowstone National Park. The park is in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. The microbe is a tiny living thing. It is the key to a scientific reaction. It is used for health tests. What do we want to underline or circle here that's going to help us understand that we get our medicine from nature? That's right. So the first sentence says, many people use medicines that come from nature. That really captures everything that we just read. We're almost done, guys. Let's keep going. Trees can help stop climate change and storm effects. The Earth is getting warmer. Scientists think that it is because of the fuel that people use. People burn these fuels to make energy. Many things from cars to lights run on this energy. Burning the fuels creates greenhouse gases that get trapped in the air. They store heat, making the world hotter. Scientists call this global warming. The world's forests and oceans help. Without them, Earth would be warming faster, scientists said. Mangroves are trees that grow around the coast. They protect land from oceans and storms, the report said. Robert Watson was a leader on the report and said the mangroves are in trouble. People have used mangroves for other things. That leaves the land in more danger from storms, Watson said. What do we want to underline here that summarizes that trees can stop climate change and storm effects? What do we want to underline? Do we want to underline the heading? Perhaps we want to underline another sentence inside of the section that we just read. I'll give you a few seconds and I'm going to move on because we're almost done. So there are quite a few sentences that we could have underlined. Some things that I looked at would have been the world's forests and oceans help. Without them, Earth would be warming faster, scientists said. I also saw that mangroves are trees that grow around the coast. They protect land from oceans and storms, the report said. These two sentences kind of let us know that trees are important to stop global warming and they help to protect against storms. All right. A living planet. The Earth is a living planet. Lovejoy said, many parts depend on each other, he said. Again, last two sentences, go ahead and underline and circle anything that helps us to understand, or if there are any words that are challenging, we want to circle them, but I don't see anything there that we would circle. So let's just underline. And it's very short. We're going to underline both sentences. The Earth is a living planet, Lovejoy said. Many parts depend on each other, he said. Okay, guys. We're almost done. I know I keep saying that, but we're really almost done this time. We have to do one more thing before our lesson is over. We're doing such a great job. So go ahead and pat yourself on the back or give yourself a round of applause because you're doing such a great job, all right? The very last thing that we have to do is we're going to go back to the beginning to day one questions, and we're going to see if we can answer some of the questions that we asked ourselves on day one. Remember, your questions are probably going to be different than my questions. So if you find that you don't have the same questions, the same answers I do, that's okay because this is really what you were curious about. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to answer my own questions. In my question one box, my question is, what do animals eat in an ecosystem? I learned that animals eat plants and other animals. Okay. In my question two box, I asked the question, how do humans affect an ecosystem? Well, it's very unfortunate, but we learned that humans sometimes negatively affect an ecosystem. Unfortunately, we're cutting down a lot of forests, and we're sometimes even the chemicals that we use end up hurting animals, like, for example, the baby eagles who were dying because of the DDT. My third question asks, how do animals depend on each other in the ecosystem? After reading, we learned that animals depend on each other for food. Now, that's not the only way, and you might have alternate answers or different answers, and you might have different questions, and that's okay, but I'm just giving you an example of how I'm answering these questions, all right? My last question in my box 4 asks, why are ecosystems important? And at the I want to say maybe the last two paragraphs that we learned about how humans get food and medicine from forests. We also learned how forests stop global warming. So these are all reasons why ecosystems are important. I'm going to write humans depend on ecosystems for food and medicine. All right. Now with that, we are actually 100% done. So thank you so much for paying attention and focusing and for tuning in for day 2 of distance learning. If you want to have a bonus activity, here's something that you can do. You can go find the definition of carbon dioxide for me, okay? You can look in the dictionary or you can look on Google and see if you can find the definition for carbon dioxide. And if you find it, you can ask your parents to text Mr. A and tell them what the definition of carbon dioxide is, all right? Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you for day 3 of distance learning. Everyone be safe, and I will see you all